I'd like to call the July 17, 2018 committee of the Albany County Legislature Law Committee to order. This is a special committee meeting I've called to specifically review local law number O, which is an omnibus bill that's been in the works for several months to address redistricting and reapportionment here in Albany County. I would just note, Peter Kraus, who's a member of the committee, is on via teleconference. We do have a quorum. We're only going to take up this one piece of legislation tonight, and we will still have our regularly scheduled meeting next week. That being said, I would ask Ms. Cunningham to take us through as one of the prime sponsors. Mr. Kraus, who's also a prime sponsor, is on the phone. He can chime in. What's before all the committee members and the members who are here is an amended version of Local Law O that addresses some concerns that have been raised by council members, a variety of different individuals and organizations. So we'll go through that now, and it's my hope at the end we can take action to move the amended version to the public hearing, which we voted out earlier this month, which is next Tuesday at 7:15. Does that sound good to everybody?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds great. Okay, you want me to start?
Yes.
Okay, so what I gave you in addition to the red markup version is I actually gave you a clean copy as well, because I think it's, there've been a lot of changes and I think it's kind of hard to read, so much as folks, Vicki, do you need? Much as folks appreciate seeing a markup, it's also nice to see a clean copy because you can see how it all hangs together. So what I think I'll do is just kind of walk through the markup and draw your attention to what I would consider to be more significant modifications. As a prelude, and Peter, please jump in whenever you feel appropriate, but as a prelude, I would say that the marked up changes came from a variety of sources, including outside organizations, including many individual members. The majority council supplied a memo that outlined many changes that they wanted to see. I took as many as I thought were reasonable that preserved the essence of what we were trying to do. When we came together as becoming a Cunningham-Kraus-Willingham piece of legislation, there were certain kind of threshold issues that each group felt very strongly about. So when we finally came together in Local Law O, the language was kind of anchored to some real core principles. One was the principle of true independence, creating a redistricting process that we could point to and say there's protections in there that preserve the independence. And I would say on the Wanda and Peter side, it was the functionality of, and what I called in the legislation, kind of the laser focus of the MMD reapportionment subcommittee. Their bill sort of hangs on the notion that we have to construct something very powerful that will be aimed and focused on preserving and paying attention to all the attendant issues relative to the interests of the MMD districts. So there's a lot of language that came out of that, and then as a final note, I would say the other thing that I did sort of as an end kind of process was take another look at Judge Kahn's opinion. You know, obviously going through it quickly in the 70 pages that it is, just to make sure that there weren't kind of issues that were outstanding that left us vulnerable. So I then went back and looked at our language to say, okay, there were certain things that jumped out in the Kahn opinion, things about transparency and collecting the information that the redistricting process kind of sifted through, and minutes and agendas and public information and public feedback. So that was kind of our process, and it was a long haul, but I would say there's probably nothing new in here That's a brand new concept that wasn't coming from local law WMV. So just that's like a little bit of a table setter. Peter, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, Joanne, I think you explained it correctly, and I just want to let the committee know that while Joanne and I have had many meetings, and of course Wanda has been involved, I want to give due credit to Joanne because she has spent the greatest amount of time putting all of this together after our discussions, and I appreciate that. And I do think this version does have the flavor of what both W and local law D had last year. Obviously, there are some changes, there are some differences, but I think we've been able to come to a point where we all feel comfortable that this will accomplish what we've been trying to do to make sure what has happened in the last 3 reapportionments does not happen again. So I appreciate everyone who's been involved. I appreciate all the sponsors who are on the bill. Hopefully, when this is all said and done, we'll have everyone in the legislature as a sponsor of this bill, because I think it's something everyone can take some credit for here, because a lot of work and effort has gone into this. But as with everything else, there might be additional questions, and obviously we want to address those. We want to make sure we do this right. We don't want to have to come back and do this again. So to the members of the committee and for other interested members there, I hope you will express your concerns or any questions or any ideas that you have to the document before you. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
So maybe what I'll do is, in order to make sure that we get everyone's questions kind of through, what I'll do is try to go through different sections and then take a stop, and then people can comment, questions, whatever. If we jump to the second page that starts really with letter B, the commission composition, and I will just say the formatting of this has changed significantly. That came out of, honestly, a couple conversations, one with the Black Caucus, where there was a big discussion about making this more readable and more sort of organized. So headers went in, the lettering changed, that came from Wanda. So I think some of that makes it easier to read, and I really appreciated that. So commission composition, this section, I would say the biggest change in here was to tighten sort of the exclusions in that red part of number 1. Make them conform to what the exclusions are in section F. But this is just a more of a broad brush of, the commission is 9 members, and it outlines sort of the basic threshold issues that determine whether or not an individual can serve, and then of course cannot. Just a tiny little clarifying issue that came out of actually the Majority Counsel's office, Kevin, and number 2, and then letter C rather, Majority Minority District Reapportionment Subcommittee. This section focuses on what we determined is the intent of the MMD Reapportionment Subcommittee and also its functions. The number 1 is more the intent, and that gives some kind of focus into, what are we contemplating when we create an MMD Reapportionment Subcommittee. Number 2, under section C, is just outlining its authority and, again, more of that intent, but essentially the authority is that it does have its own staff, it has the authority to contract and to hire its own legal and reapportionment consultant. So let's go to D, and then maybe we can stop, because D also has, and the next page, has a whole bunch of language related to the MMD Reapportionment Subcommittee. So this is the composition, the appointment process, and function. When the Legislative Black Caucus was created in the midst of many discussions about the redistricting proposals, we decided that it would be a good idea to anchor the construction and the control the appointment process of the MMD subcommittee to the LBC. The LBC now is a functioning, has staff, entity. I know we've made a rules change, we're also probably contemplating others. But that was kind of where we anchored the reapportionment, the MMD subcommittee. Now you'll see all that red in number 3, the number, that is the same language that we saw in number 1 for the commission. So what we're trying to do is make the two parallel. The commission has certain exclusions, who can be on it, a registered voter, resident of the county, and then the exclusions, and then in number 3, the same kind of language. Number 4 is the appointment process. We had tons of conversation about getting a running start in the commission and MMD subcommittee process. There was quite a bit of comment by Judge Kahn about the fact that the commission itself was very rushed in its deliberations. So we added language that the appointments to the MMD subcommittee, and this will be the same later for the commission, may be made in the year of the census. So that's in the year of 2020 when the data is going to be collected. The commission can start to do its work, the county can start publicizing, look, we're doing this process, we have a commission, we want people to serve on it. So that was purposeful, and we outlined we want knowledgeable, capable, interested, experienced folks to do that. We outlined that we will use all communications means necessary to educate the public and the need for appointees. All of that was very purposeful because we felt strongly that we wanted to get the word out, educating the public and communicating to them about this process, soliciting interested folks was a huge priority. So number 5 is the sort of how you get to the individuals, and the MMD subcommittee, there's 7 individuals who serve on the MMD reapportionment subcommittee. So to get the 7, we talked about that the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus will appoint 2. So he or she, right off the bat, appoints the 2. They still have to meet the independence criteria, but that person has the authority, much like later you'll see the commission. Oh yay, Wanda's here. You see the authority, Wanda's here, Peter, vested in the chair, so the chair of the LBC. And then we outline a process that the additional, Wanda, we are on the 3rd page under D, we're on D4. Or 5 rather. So the additional members of the
Well, she's looking at the red one. There's no 5 anymore,
will then
so.
appoint the remaining members of the MMD subcommittee. We also added something at the end that in the event there's some disagreement and the members of the Black Caucus can agree, we empower the chair to have the authority to make a final selection of the individuals under consideration. So we didn't want to get to a stalemate, we wanted to have a little bit of a trapdoor in the event that there's disagreement and there can't be a decision made.
The chair of the Black Caucus?
The chair of the Black Caucus.
Okay.
So that's all contained in the Black Caucus. So subsection 6 under there is not new. I think we just cleaned some things up. So why don't I stop there, especially because Wanda is here. So we just finished going through changes that were in B, C, and D.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So just on the MMD pieces in the bill now, I know there's 3 members of the Black Caucus here. Have you guys, has the caucus discussed this legislation? Everybody's okay with it, likes it, thinks it's gonna adequately address the issues we've had every 10 years? Drawing majority-minority districts?
This is this is where the language came from.
Okay.
Okay, so we've had thorough discussions amongst ourselves, but also, okay,
This is good.
with the other sponsors, our sponsor. And there's a lot of thought put into this to ensure that we saw some little discrepancies between what the commission rules were and the MMD's rules were to ensure that they were both the same,
Okay.
okay? There's just one thing that Mert had brought up that I still can't, I don't see, and I don't know where it is, and I don't know if it was found yet. And that is that the subcommittee operates independently of the commission and then makes their report, okay? And if I'm saying this wrong, Mert, I need your help, was I think the members wanted to ensure that the MMDs were drawn first. Because that's always been the problem.
Yes.
Everything's drawn and then we've been drawn, and that's how we've always gotten into the trouble that we've been in. Is that right, Mert?
That's correct.
Is that in here?
No.
There is
No, not the drawing.
a sequencing of that, and I was just trying to find the language of,
That's in a couple places. It's like working collaboratively and in tandem, and then it report, you send the report, and then they consider the report, and then I'll ask a question about that later. But that's all pretty clear in a couple places, but I didn't see anything about
there's
the
not a
order.
sequencing.
If I could clarify and make it simple, if we go back to the final version of V, Section G, it says, "The General Commission will, after receiving the MMD Commission's recommendation, reapportion the remaining legislative districts and then present the combined recommendations of both commissions as one reapportionment recommendation to the full legislature for their consideration."
Where
So
are
it
you?
is in there?
This is from V. This is from V.
Yeah, yeah.
Neither the General Commission nor the county legislature shall alter the recommendations of the MMD Commission without the approval of the MMD Commission. If the county legislature rejects the General Commission's report, it shall advise the General Commission of its reasons for the rejection, and the General Commission shall review the reasons for the rejection and submit its recommendations after due consideration of the county legislature's reasons for the rejection of the initial recommendations. And the bottom line is, we've been sued 3 consecutive times for non-compliance with the Voting Rights Act. The truth is, people have probably been hearing about the major shootings that's been happening within 8 blocks from where I live. The fact of the matter is, legislative districts 1 through 6 exist within maybe a 2 to 4 mile radius. Sam's district right now, even if you include the Hispanic population, barely reaches a 50% threshold. The only way to really effectively deal with this is to carve out the majority districts first, and then everything else falls into place. And in terms of conflict, the conflict that has historically occurred has occurred because of bias within legislators themselves who either favor or punish people. It has nothing to do with the recommendations on how lines are cut. And at the end of the day, the legal responsibility rests with the legislature. So
Anyway.
that's all that's it.
And that has, having sat through 2000 and then 10, and now, and you know, and with this third one coming up, that is true. One of the main things that stood out in my mind that I remember and recall was the people that came from the rural parts of the county who came and complained bitterly about how the lines were drawn the last time, on how Gilderman was cut, and you know, and they just took one piece of property and just cut it in half, and they were not happy about it, but they made their case, and it was a sure indication of people drawing lines based on personal reasons and not for the purpose of communities of interest, which is the way the lines are supposed to be drawn. And that is clear and distinct in the law. I don't care what you look at. It has to do with communities and interests. And they did that even to, which we did put something in here, you know, in reference to geographical compositions of the county to ensure that we also looked at that.
What Mert just read, is that physically in here?
No, it's
It's
not.
in
No,
part of
it's-
V, it's not in here,
Yeah.
it's not in
So
here.
that, do you have copies of that language, Mert?
I just have one copy of V that, you know, I guess we could, I mean, the
Local
basic
V, that was
concept is
one of the
that
original versions. There was-
you just gotta do the
VW.
minority, majority districts first.
Okay.
And the point being is, see, this is, the concept that I don't understand
That's
why
what he's
people
saying.
can't
He liked
get
that
is,
sentence. He could put-
this is
I'm trying
a
to-
geographic problem, it's not a mathematic problem. There's a physical, small area where the majority of people of color live. And there's a vast area that needs to be covered. If you look at how crazily gerrymandered we are, I mean, I don't want to get into the details, but it's maddening. And my prediction is we may need as many, unless we do something crazy, like lower the number of legislators that we have, which I believe the court would think would be wrong, because that would automatically lower the number of realistically possible minority districts that could be created. I think lowering the number of districts would actually run afoul of the Voting Rights Act in that respect, and I think the court would note that. But short of that, if you know, we don't deal with this difficulty of how we had to create Sam's district. My old district used to go from the border of Bonanza all the way to Madison Avenue. Now I have a more reasonable district. It's the heart of Arbor Hill. And still Sam's district is barely 50% majority minority. My prediction is we might have as many as 2 new majority minority districts. I don't know how crazy that's going to be to cut that up. I don't care what anybody says, because it's not easy. And so we have to deal with the practical realities, not with this concept of, well, if we have less districts, we're going to save money, or somehow the problem is not really based on the majority minority districts. That's the reason why we were sued 3 times, and I don't know if the judge is going to look favorably on us being in a position to be not in compliance with the Voting Rights Act for a 4th time.
So, I guess the language Mert proposes, will you guys separately work to incorporate that into another version of this?
Well,
That would be my recommendation.
what I would,
Could some of the rest of us, like, talk, I mean, I have issues very similar to this, so before we decide on language, I'd like to at least have an
Oh, yeah, sure.
opportunity to.
I'm just trying to get an idea of.
No, I mean, I think there's a lot of language changes that need to be made. And that was gonna be sort of my first question was, is this a working session to throw out concepts? And, you know, Peter said, I'd like to hear what concerns there are, and I think, obviously, Mert and Wanda have lived through this, and they have lived through it firsthand and have the battle scars to prove it.
I have the battle scars.
And understand that, but if we're designing a process that's supposed to fix some things, we ought to take a look at the entire process. And I don't know if,
What do you mean by the entire?
well, let me give you an example, and I kind of organized my thoughts
Okay.
a little bit differently. Right now, you're envisioning the creation of two committees, which I have absolutely no problem with, and everybody gets their own consultant, map maker, staff, etc. But yet, ultimately, the bigger commission is going to have to take the product from the MMD commission, and I'm not sure that the language here says it has to be taken in toto.
No, it doesn't.
What it says is it has to be considered, okay?
My question.
And
But that's the problem.
Okay, well, no, that's why I'm saying, I think we're all talking about the same thing. I'm not probably to the depth that you are. It says it has to be considered, because I'll give you an example. When the majority minority districts gives direction to its staff, what's it going to tell them? How big are the districts that they should draw? Because right now, we have a variation of districts that are up to 14%, 14.2%. The second district has 7,073 people, and Joe's district has 8,135. There's almost 1,100 more people in this district. So when you tell the map makers, once again, there was at one point in time sort of I called them the commandments, the things that we weren't going to do, we weren't going to violate, was that there was going to be a 2% rule, okay?
Deviation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There couldn't be more than a 2% deviation. Well, that would mean that both teams have to start with that as a goal. But it doesn't start that way. So that if one team decides that, hey, if we go down to 6,500 members per district in ours, we can draw really nice districts. Well, that may mean that other districts have to be 8,500 or 8,700. So people gotta have the same marching, or the same rules for both.
Just to address what you're saying
Sure,
right now.
sure.
Okay? That was part of the lawsuit, because those deviations were not recognized, okay? And so, we know that it was never in the charter
Right.
itself, okay? But it's just like with anything where you have rules and regulations, okay?
Yeah.
It came from the lawsuit, those percentages, that's where they came from, okay? And so it's not in here, and you're saying that we need to put that in here?
What I'm saying is, I want to feel as though everybody's going to, we're all starting with the same goals. Now, it may be that, I mean, if you take the county population, you divide it by 39, at one point in time, that number was 7,800. I don't know what it is today, I don't know what the current population is. And I realize that it may be, if you're drawing 7,800 people, that maybe there's a problem in creating the majority-minority districts. But the point is, I think we should allow some, I mean, I would put in the fact on number 2 here, minimizing the population variance among difference by having 2% deviation as a goal to the extent practicable. If it's not practicable and it has to be a 5% deviation, well then, that's fine. State your case as to why it's not, you know,
I understand what you're saying.
you understand what I'm,
Can I just make a couple?
sure.
Yeah, and then I wanna keep going through it,
Because I
because
got,
some of this stuff is addressed later on in the law,
yeah.
you know, and I don't wanna be here past 6:30 in all honesty.
I know, but if the thought is we're going to push something out of here tonight for a public hearing, we either gotta do what we gotta do, or we gotta have a way to
Make additional amendments.
make additional amendments.
Okay, but before we make any amendment tonight, that language would have to be carefully
Absolutely.
researched, going back to the lawsuit, the present one, to ensure that we're actually following Khan's guidelines and his decision. So, unless somebody has that, we can't do it tonight. I'll just be honest, I don't think that we can because we don't have it.
Joe, and then Joanne, we're gonna keep,
What's the percentage in the state legislature?
well, we changed the redistricting process to a constitutional amendment now. But that deviation of plus or minus 5% that we're referring to now, was not in the constitutional amendment. So, for example, state senate districts, some upstate, downstate, the downstate ones are much more overpopulated. that's around 9.8% more population. That's constitutionally what you're allowed for state district.
Congress, I am told,
Congress
is
is
plus or
the-
minus 2. 2 in either way.
One
So it's
person.
a spread
Yeah,
of 4, no, a spread of 4. 2 in one direction, 2 in the other.
I think it's 1-on-1.
Timmy?
Oh, is it? I read 98 to 102% for the House. It could be different for the Senate, though.
Okay, but I mean,
Point being, it's different for the state races.
but I would like, once again, I would like there to be a goal that everybody says we're striving for, is that they're going to be as equal as possible, and if that is not possible,
Well, that's
if it
our-
is not possible, tell us.
I think there's a legitimate, at least as an attorney who does some of this stuff, I think there's a legitimate reason why that deviation needs to exist to address the majority minority districts
I agree.
for purposes of creating them. Whether or not you can get there or not, within a 2% deviation or 5%, remains to be seen. We've run into problems with that, but, you know.
But if you have the
your point is well
language, it
taken.
says, or as practicable,
You
then
start on that, and if you have to tweak it, I can understand your point,
That-
and that does make sense.
Yeah, but I'm real concerned about putting anything in the charter, okay, without further review of that.
Sure.
In addition to that, just to even speak to the rules for the commission, I don't know if that applied to the rest of the county. So I'm just trying to be fair as possible right now in bringing that up. I'm not sure if that was in regards to the rest of the county.
Okay, let's keep
Yeah,
going.
Yeah, just
should.
one,
It should.
I would say one almost
just saying.
philosophical comment is, this is, the commission is empowered to do its work. So, and I say that because this is sort of outlining a governance philosophy and goals and process that then professionals will then employ
Yep,
to take on.
that's right.
So the reason I say that is there's a lot of language that is directive with respect to working together, the MMD subcommittee with the commission. It's not prescriptive, it is directive in the sense that the intent is that these two entities, and one is subordinate to the other. The subcommittee is a subordinate entity to the commission. But the intent is that these two entities work together. There is not a prescriptive that, the subcommittee would start with 5 districts and everyone else, would get the rest, and then that process would unfold. And quite honestly, I don't think there should be, because the commission has been created to be a professional governance structure with competent staff, both on the subcommittee level and at the commission level. And their job is to put together a redistricting plan. I think that we've outlined process, governance principles, goals, language about philosophy and what our intentions are. It's really clear what our intentions are. We don't need to tell them how to do their job. We don't need to be, in my view, we don't want to be that prescriptive. We've outlined and set the table so they know what they have to do. And they have to comport with federal laws and all required statutes, Voting Rights Act, all of that. So they know that they have a mandate to do that. That's why I'm sort of,
But the mandate still would come from, somehow from the legislature.
yeah, from the
You
county,
know,
of course.
Lynn,
I was wondering who do you see like being the gatekeeper or the, we ask them to do this thing, we tell them that they have to reflect the diversity of the county, and I don't know, does that mean by percentage? Like, so if there's 50% of women in the county, does that mean that 50% of the people on the commission have to be women? So how does,
I think it's.
if they interpret it a certain way and we say we don't agree with the way they interpret it, or we don't think there's enough minority or female representation on, then who can do something about it? Is it up to the 39 of us, or is it up to,
Well, I would
the
say
chair or,
that
you know.
as the process unfolds, I mean, I would hope people in the legislature and in county government and really anybody would say, you know, here's a stack of 10 people or 5 people that I know that are very qualified. And in our providing that information, you know, I'm a woman and I'd like to see some women on this commission. So, you know, here's 5 qualified women. No, there's no threshold saying 2 have to be this or 3 have to be this, but there's language over and over again about diversity and
Reflecting
about
diversity.
trying to make sure that this commission, no offense, is not a bunch of white guys. No offense to all the white guys that I love here.
Just having a commission's a start.
Yeah, but
We
you
never
know,
even had a commission.
I think the one thing that we're getting away from here is this. This isn't about women.
No.
No, it's not.
Let me make my point. The reason why we're here in these in-depth discussions right now has been because of civil rights lawsuits in regards to African Americans. Okay, so let's kind of like not mix that together. I mean, I understand what you're saying, you know. However, I don't want to start talking about women when what we're really talking about here is drawing the lines of talking about communities of interest. You're going to have women, white women, black women, lesbian women, homosexual men, whatever you want to call them, okay? But that drives me a little, sets me off, you know, and I'm a woman.
I did not know what the percentage of African-American people are in Albany, so, in the county, so I picked women because I sort of knew that it was about half but, you know, is it 19, 26, 49? I don't know, so, I'm sorry.
But that's what this, let's
13?
not
I
forget
heard
that that's
19.
what this whole, the legislation that we're doing, that's what it's about. It's ensuring that the lines are drawn for, you know, in fairness as far as.
Let's keep going through that.
Okay, and I would say, Wanda, I mean, that's why, you know,
The city
empowering the
is 19
LPC
and
to
county
appoint
21.
subcommittee members is, to me, a guarantee that you're gonna get members of the
Oh,
reapportionment.
I'm not saying they shouldn't be on there, don't misunderstand me. You know, I can't tell some people in my family that, because, you know, they gotta be included in everything, which I don't have a problem with that. But I'm just saying that is not
No, got
why
it.
we're here.
Okay,
Well,
let's move on
Gotcha.
to.
I mean, are we done on questions here?
Well, we're gonna move on to a different section and then,
Well,
do you have
I
more
just,
questions on this section specifically?
yeah,
Okay.
because I read new number 6 under D. And I think this was what Mert was getting at, and I'm hearing
Number 6.
a dichotomy of opinion. D,
You're in the
which
black
is
markup?
MMD reapportionment subcommittee, and then all the way down to 6, okay? The MMD subcommittee issues a report. The report gets sent to the committee. The committee considers it.
Mert has an amendment here.
Well, does the commission get to look at it and say, we have some concerns?
Yes, that's the language.
And if we have those concerns, would you take a look at those concerns?
Yes, that's the language.
And resubmit it?
Yeah,
You-
that is the
Is that in
language.
the language?
Can you reread?
Okay, let me read this.
Or can someone make a photocopy of it? One of
Well,
you.
let me read it slow first. Neither the general commission nor the county legislature shall alter the recommendations of the MMD commission without the approval of the MMD commission. If the county legislature rejects the general commission's report, it shall advise the general commission of its reasons for the rejection, and the general commission shall review the reasons for the rejection and resubmit its recommendations after due consideration of the county legislator's reasons for the rejection of the initial recommendations.
So that does not give the general commission the ability to say, we have a problem
Sentence 2 did.
with a,
Read sentence 2 again, Mert.
To send the whole thing
If-
back.
if the county,
Well, no, you have to vote it down first, and
No, no,
then you
no,
can
no.
send it.
well, it offers for a deliberation of issues on the merit. In other words, and again, see, I think we're being too theoretical about this thing.
But Mert, there's one thing missing in there.
Go ahead.
It doesn't speak to the MMD, it really just speaks to the General Commission. So it's not saying that there's something wrong with the MMD report. If you, that's what I just heard.
Yeah, that's why I think the second sentence addresses it, but I mean, I could be wrong. Mert, do you wanna have some copies made of that? We can move on,
Somebody want to make a copy?
and then we'll come back to
You
this
have
issue.
anybody?
Can I just make another comment though?
This is the page.
I read this differently, the language in here. I read this as very permissive. The commission shall, upon the receipt of the report from the MMD, reflect its consideration and prepare a written report to the legislature that documents its consideration of the recommendations of the MMD prior to the submission of the final report. I do not read that it's all or nothing. Its consideration could be a part of it, all of it, none of it.
Okay.
Its consideration, I think, is permissive, and it's the landscape. It's saying, you know,
So if there's some issue, if as a result of drawing these lines, it takes fingers out of Albany into Watervliet, Cohoes, Colony, Bethlehem, Guilderland,
But it
you
doesn't,
you can say, you know something, can you take another shot at that and minimize the dislocation of municipal boundaries?
but that's coming from,
Chris,
that language right
Yes,
now
Peter.
comes from the
Could I
legislature.
just interject on that?
Yeah,
Well, no,
let's
that-
just, Wanda has a thought, just let her finish, and then
Okay,
Peter.
wait, again,
Okay.
just, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm just trying to be clear. That language speaks to the legislature having a problem, not the commission. Is that correct?
Sounds like
Right.
it.
Okay,
Right.
so, I guess there would have to be, because we don't have the last say anyway, but all of that takes place with the hearings that come after the lines are drawn.
Released.
So that's going to, I don't care what you do, that's what's going to happen.
But the MMD commission is gonna have its own hearings. See, there's a whole set of parallel hearings set
We
up.
haven't gotten further in, once the lines are drawn.
Okay.
Everybody, yeah.
But you see, this is inextricably entwined.
Yeah.
And the point is that somebody said before, the subcommittee is a subcommittee of the big committee, which means the big committee ultimately is going to control. We obviously want the best work of the MMD subcommittee, but if there is some reason that there is an issue, the big committee needs to be able to say to the subcommittee, we have identified an issue, and would you attempt to fix it?
I thought.
And that is in the language.
Well, that line, no, that line,
Well, we're gonna get
It's
it,
in
we're
there.
gonna get
It's
it,
in
we
there.
can review it. But Peter, on the phone, you had a
Yeah.
question, so.
Thank you, thank you.
what?
This is for Mert, for everybody there. Mert, if you strip away all the language here, the bottom line for you and for the members of the MMD subcommittee is the bottom line that you want to be able to prepare your recommendations and submit them and have them accepted as submitted. And if not, if the commission says, well, you know, we like the recommendations, but we think you ought to change X, Y, and Z, then they send it back to you, and as a commission, you say, that's a nice thought, but we're not going to change X, Y, and Z. We like it the way it is right now. Is the bottom line for you that once that process takes place, then does the final recommendation of the MMD take precedence over what the entire commission might otherwise think?
No, but you see, again, everybody has the language, so let's do one thing.
Ernest, do you have the
Let's everybody read section G
G would
carefully.
be 6, right? So,
6G.
Let me see what it
you've
is.
got it as G on the markup, Merton, but I believe it would be, is it a whole new 6?
No, this is from V. So this is
Where are you gonna stick?
section 207, part G.
My crazy little script.
And G is exactly what happens.
But let me explain why I don't understand why people don't get this, and this is why it's not a problem. Let's just say this bottle is all of this is legislative districts 1 through 6. We have 39 existing districts, maybe we'll have 29. There's only so many ways you're gonna cut this up. And after you cut it up, the logic of what the alternatives are gonna be are extremely limited, because this exists here, and it has to fill up an area the size of the table. And so what it says is that if there are some issues, the commission will consider it, and ultimately, it is the legislature as a whole that has to make the final determination. And if, however, the determination runs afoul of the recommendations of the consent decree, then we get sued a 4th time. But the reason why it's not a practical problem is there's only so far you can stretch that. And I don't know why people don't
Yeah,
understand that.
but the other thing is this, I'm trying to remember if you were around, Chris, I can't remember. The way this works, after the lines are drawn, it's submitted, let's say now, right now, to the General Commission, okay? The General Commission may have some issues, let's say with the outline, parts, especially if, when Albany says that they don't want to go outside of Albany, okay? And that's gonna come under the General Commission, which then they may wind up, depending upon how our lines are drawn, saying, I think we're gonna have to do this, that, would you please look at it? And so, since there are 2 people drawing the maps, that's when that collaboration has to take place. Not even considering right now that we're talking about 2 separate people drawing maps. They came back several times with maps. Several times they did that. That is the same thing that will take place even before we consider voting. There are hearings that have to take place after the lines are drawn. So it's not just, okay, the lines are drawn, we vote on it. That is not the way it happens. And I think that's part of the problem for those that have not been a part of this process, to understand all of the different hearings that have to take place after the lines are drawn. And it's just not okay, we like this.
But what goes on at the hearings?
What goes on?
Well, if I'm at a hearing and I don't like the way the lines are drawn, and I come into the hearing and I say,
And you're going to complain.
I know, but then what happens? Do they, and that's how it all got gerrymandered to begin with, right? That's what I
No,
heard.
we didn't do any of this. You gotta
No,
understand.
you didn't do any
We
of
never
it.
did any of this. The city of Albany does this now with their council districts. They have hearings, they go into different communities, and people show up and they say, well, these streets should be in, this is really part of a neighborhood association, why would you split it up? It should be all in 3, not 3, 4, and 5. And they have, I went to some of them, so, that's the process they did. In Albany County, we literally just gave some software to a dude, marked it up, and then Sean got the maps back, and he says, here's the maps, what does everybody think? And then legislators, behind closed doors, provided input,
That's it in
this is
a
a
nutshell.
whole new animal.
Okay.
What we're doing here now. This has never been done.
It's more transparent.
Well, yes,
This will be.
well,
Hopefully.
the other one's gotten us in trouble 3 times, cost millions of dollars in taxpayer money. Paul, another question.
No, I'm just looking at Mert's language.
Okay.
But this language does not give the big commission, the ability to say to the MMD subcommission, we have an issue, could you take a look at it? What this says is it has to be included, and if the county legislature rejects the entire general commission's report. So that says to me, the maps have to be drawn. This amendment have to be drawn, you know, with strict adherence to the minority community's report. And then everything has to go down in flames before you get to state the reasons for the rejection and recommendations. And what I'm suggesting is that I kind of like the idea of a collaboration and a more parallel process. I mean,
I think what you're missing here is this. Right here, it says, advise the General Commission of its reasons for its rejection, and the General Commission shall review. Just because it says that the General Commission shall review, you're excluding the fact that the subcommittee would not be part of that, that consideration.
But Wanda,
And it is though, that's the only way
Okay.
Can I just
that,
make a suggestion there? Because I think when we get into some of the other stuff, we can, and maybe I'm not opposed to an amendment that kind of teases out more of that kind of back and forth and, you know, but I don't think this is the spot for it. I think later.
well, I don't think this language does it either. That was the point
I don't
that I
think
was
this
making.
language does it, but I think there's a way to make some changes that would, but I don't think this is the right section.
Alright, let's keep going through it. Because we're bogged down on page 3, and there's all this other stuff as Wanda said,
Okay.
with the transparency, the hearings,
Right.
how the process unfolds, and we need to get
Okay,
into it.
so section E is commission membership and process. I would say, again, we added in number 2, this is language that was elsewhere as well, that we want a diverse set of individuals. This is the top of, I don't know what page, but it's under E2. Diversity of residents with respect to socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, gender, blah, blah, blah.
This gets to
Geographic
things.
residents, including the representation of rural and small communities.
Good.
All right, then
Yep.
section F is the commission independence. This was, I would say, a core issue of local law W that included kind of the exclusions. And the intent here, I would say, and again, thank you to the Black Caucus for some refinements to that language, but the intent is not to exclude every state employee, but rather folks that are kind of the insider crowd, political appointees, legislative staff, you know, the friends and family of the members of the legislature, committee people, that sort of bucket. There is some cleanup language that I'll pass out at the end related to this section that Pat identified, that I'm gonna share. It doesn't materially change it, it's just a little bit of a cleanup. Okay, under B of that section is the threshold of, we're looking to exclude the big donors. This changed pretty dramatically from prior versions of, even in local law W, but that was the intent of that. Okay. Letter C is just a tiny clarification that actually Kevin identified. Letter G is the timing of the commission appointments. These are, again, that language at the top, right at the beginning, is that these appointments can be made in the year of the census after extensive solicitation. That language appears during the MMD process as well. We did change the 9 appointments. We said that the 9 appointments should be 3, 3, and 3. 3 for the chair of the legislature, 3 for the majority leader, and 3 for the minority leader. That seemed a little bit more fair and also something I thought that just made sense. Okay, so we got rid of all that clunky language, that's the strikeout of, below that section. Again, we were just saying in the year of the census, we're gonna be soliciting, we're gonna appoint these people. We don't need the 60 days, 70 days, that just seemed kind of clunky.
G.
That's all G. Okay, so H is the RFP, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just one question regarding, as far as with the appointment in the year of the census,
Yes.
just looking back, I definitely think that that's a good consideration regarding,
Speak up.
I'm sorry. I think that as far as having the ability to try and appoint people during the year of the census as well, I'm just curious that during, under the very first section, under point A, the initial commissions are established upon publication of the results of the federal decennial census. And I wasn't sure if that would need to be amended to otherwise make those two terms
Oh,
consistent.
synchronized?
Yeah,
Okay.
just as a point to raise.
Yeah, I will look at that, that's
Of course.
A, so that's
But
a
just-
timing conformity kind of thing?
The year of the census and when the census is actually available are not the same.
Right, the year of the census, say it's 2020, during that process, we know the census is going on, there's no reason why the legislature can't widely publicize, look, we're doing this, we want you involved, here, we're gonna have a big process. Please-
Historically, isn't the census would be in 20, census report would be in 2021, and then the Board of Elections has to take the data from the census blocks and turn them into EDs. That takes time.
They typically will do that after the lines are drawn.
Okay,
So that, we don't draw around them, they will draw around us.
But
okay.
have
not
some
only that, don't
software
forget
that'll-
the city comes after the county.
Right, and I think we reference after federal and state.
In what
The
respect?
feds draw, the state draws, and then the county draws,
And then the city,
and then the city draws
at least for us.
City draws what?
their
Their
lines. And that's when the EDs are done.
The election districts within the wards.
Joanne, I have a question about FB on the money contributing, campaign contributions. Is
Yeah.
that, if someone contributes the maximum amount to one candidate for count, so for example, the maximum amount for a county legislator is 1,000, so if someone gives 1,000, they can't be on the committee, but if they give 800, they can?
Yeah.
If they give 802, then that would put them over the limit, so they would, is that okay?
Yeah, this was something that we went back and forth a lot on, you know, what's the number? If you put 2,000 in there, what's so magic about that? So we decided we would say, you know, that they're the highest donors. There's also,
Yeah, I think we just want to clarify exactly, if, for example, if it's for county, if they give 500 to 3 county
So,
legislator
do you
candidates,
wanna
would that,
say,
would
the
that
maximum-
accumulate, or?
no, I mean, the
Or
intent
just-
was the maximum allowed to a single candidate.
Okay,
It's $1,000. So you could put
Yeah.
$1,000 in here, because it starts at 1,000 as our threshold, and then goes up for countywide.
yeah. So if you gave, I don't know what, let's say it's 5,000 for the county executive, I don't know what it is. If you gave 5,000 to the county executive, then you'd also be disqualified. Is that what it's meant?
Yeah,
Meant for all county offices.
yeah, it is.
Do you
Sure.
do you foresee that these commission members need some sort of training or understanding of what their duties are going to be during this process?
You know what else you're confusing too? They're not drawing the lines.
I understand. No, I
But
understand.
but that's what's going on with a lot of us. The commission is not drawing the lines. But what they are listening to is they're having those hearings and they're ensuring that they're going throughout the county to ensure that what the people want is being done. I don't care if it's simply, don't split Orange Street because, you know, it's a community of interest. The folks over here married the folks across the street, you know, why didn't you draw the line at Clinton Avenue? Okay, instead of it within, you know, one of the smaller blocks instead of going to the main street. you know.
And it happens frequently in
Yes,
reality.
yes, and so those are the types of things that will go on in the hearings, okay? So I just want to throw, you know, that out there. The hearings are very, very important.
But on a state level, you can divide a city, let's say an assembly district or a senate district. You can divide a city, but not a town.
That's constitutional, that's in the Constitution, which has now been changed.
Oh, it has, okay.
Yeah, block on block, added language, sort of like what Paul was saying, but I don't want to digress, let's just keep moving.
Okay, let's talk about
Did
the
we vote on the
RFP.
Constitution? We didn't, when did?
Where we are.
13, 14.
But I think that was a
Sure
great
we
point.
did.
And the RFP process, it's a good segue, Wanda, because the RFP process outlines.
What section?
It's
H.
section H, starts at the bottom of
Yeah, okay.
page.
It's okay. A request for proposal.
So the RFP process is that the commission and MMD subcommittee shall expeditiously issue 2 RFPs. Actually, I forgot to add that language about the purchasing office.
So that RFP they could work on it in
Yes.
2020
Yeah,
to be
sure.
released the following year.
What language are you talking about the purchasing office?
so-
Because that was one of my concerns.
Okay, so the office of the chair, the council, Pat and Tim, I met with them yesterday and they suggested that we outline that the RFPs will be vetted through the Albany County Office of Purchasing.
Yeah, it's.
No, I was gonna make that suggestion. It should be done under the county's professional procurement guidelines.
Yep,
I mean, because we have professional procurement guidelines.
okay,
Because
done,
we,
done.
There aren't that many people that do this type of stuff.
Right.
That's true.
Majority of council also pointed that out, so I'm not taking credit for that.
okay, well,
But yeah.
I thought it up by myself.
Yes, we will make that, that's a no-brainer and that
Are you
is,
floating up there?
so it's the Office of Purchasing, Pat?
Division.
But this also goes back to the other point, and I hate to go back to something that we're not up to yet,
Right.
but I think it's gotta be, there's gotta be common criteria in the RFPs. And we gotta state that it's common criteria.
Other than what we identified, that the
Well,
maps
in-
are gonna be drawn
Well,
to reflect the goals in section
yeah,
I.
but I think it ought to say that, because you're going to great lengths to say, we've got 2 independent processes here, okay? And one person's vision of what complies and another person's vision of what complies may not be the same. This, I mean, it's an odd way to construct a program,
I have a different view.
okay?
I would say that I look at this as a full committee and a subcommittee. Their goals are the same. The subcommittee is empowered to do one thing, and that is focus on the MMDs and do it right. They get to have their own staff, their own consultant, they control it, but they have the same goal as the broader commission. And they're instructed per the legislation to work collaboratively. It's outlined in there, I don't know how many times, but the intent is these are 2 agents that are working together. So at the end of the day, yeah, you might have a subcommittee chair that is a little bit of a different guy or woman than the full committee chair like you do in a legislative structure. But at the end of the day, they're both charging for the same goal and they're both working in tandem for the same goal. We are not, I think, putting what I would consider to be a lot of gratuitous language around their relationship. But the intention is, these are professionals, and they're headed for the same goal. One is a subcommittee, one is a full committee. And the subcommittee has a laser focus on one thing. The broader commission is instructed, take their stuff and consider it, and if you don't consider it, tell us why, because we want to know why you skipped over it. But the intent is take their body of work and make it part of the broader commission. So, sorry for the loss.
No, I appreciate everything you say, and I agree with it. I would just like to see a little bit more of the cooperative language, the ability to review and reflect, and if we got an issue, let's put it on the table, give somebody an opportunity to resolve it. I'm very sensitive to the bit about variance in districts.
Yeah, I get that.
And I have no problem with deviation. That sounded terrible. I have no problem with differences in the size of districts.
Wasn't much better.
As long as we document why we have to do it.
How about the size of hands? Go with that.
Size of what?
Hands. That's a joke. Go on.
Why don't we moving, because that's a good segue. So section I, and we reference it that the RFPs are anchored to reflect the goals in I. So I is compliance and adherence with appropriate federal laws and equal representation goals. And remember, those are headers, so they have power in and of themselves. We identify that that's a section that's about abiding by the law and also representing, ensuring equal representation goals.
See, some of this, I don't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt, Joanne.
No, go ahead.
Some of this stuff, Paul, is sort of addressed in
Yes, it
in
is.
here.
Well, that's why I was going to make I had two suggestions for, it's I2, okay?
By,
Which is the factors.
You want the 2% standard deviation, which I don't know if that's the right thing.
Well, maybe it's 3%, some percent as practicable. So if
Okay.
it's not,
The norm.
I
just
get-
so you don't end up with a 14% spread, okay?
Well, you can't, because that's not abiding by that bullet. Minimization of population
Okay.
variance among
Well,
districts.
I'm just suggesting to you what.
that's the
We
language
have
you want, it's there.
It is there.
It's two.
It's 2, but it says,
Federal law is 10% based on court rulings.
federal law is 10%.
Based on court rulings, and even that's flexible, they've made. based
So
on court
I
precedents.
don't think we want a 10% variance in either direction. That's a 20% variance.
No. It's plus or minus 5% either way for a maximum of 10%. Anything over 10% is unconstitutional.
That's
So
in a,
Peter, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's, I think we can deal with the 5% either way. I think the smaller the number, obviously, the better. But this is difficult. I don't know what the magic number is. There is a magic number. I mean, obviously, we're not going to, the closer we can come to what federal law requires, the better off we're going to be here. If we try to do something that is not consistent with federal law, then I think we're going to end up in court again by someone who says, well, you didn't take this into consideration. Your percentages were outside of the realm of what federal law allows. And I think we want to make sure that we structure the language so that we don't run afoul of what the federal law allows. Now, some people might not like what the federal law allows. Well, okay, but the fact of the matter is, this is what the federal law allows. So where do you go from there? I think you have to follow what the federal law says.
well, then go with 5% deviation. That gives you 5% either way, it gives you your 10.
Does anyone have a strong opinion that is different than the 5%?
I think it should be smaller, because I really think you should keep these districts.
You want to say something, achieving less than 5%, but
The population is 98,000.
My issue with
divided by
that
40,
is,
39.
number 2 covers it.
2,500.
Number 2 is like, it's the equivalent,
That's below. some are, look at the ones that
cumulative.
are above.
That makes it
I'm sorry,
sound
we're getting-
constitutional.
Frank, you understand.
I still think it should be, I should think it should be less than 5% either way. I really think the 2% deviation plus or minus is really the way to go. I think it, because you want to make sure these districts are drawn properly, and I think you should make them as close as you can to the real, true population.
Yeah, I would only say to that, that deviation is necessary for these majority, minority districts in the
They
city
are.
to get to where we need to be to create that. I don't necessarily disagree with your point, I'm just saying in practicality, effectuating that point, where you were trying to draw these it is very complicated. That's my 2 cents, I don't disagree with you, I think if there's a way to tighten this up, we can. It's just, I don't know if you can get there in the city.
Well, why don't, I would,
As practical,
You
it
can,
means,
yeah,
you know,
sure,
you could insert 5% as, whereas practicable, okay? So you're basically giving the map makers, look, strive for keeping this all at 5% either way.
I would put that in sub 2 here where it says minimization of population
Right.
variance to the extent practicable. That's all I would add there. And I
You
think
wouldn't
that's
put a
the big-
percentage
yeah,
in
say
there?
that again.
No, I wouldn't either.
No, because it's, other people, WANA has an issue with that. I'm trying to split the baby here.
Well, I think by saying to the extent practicable, if there's a district that needs 12% deviation.
Can't do 12,
If,
by law.
plus or
why?
minus 5 each way, so 9.98.
So if you can't get to 51%, you don't draw it?
What-
No, you see, you gotta understand, you're starting with a blank canvas here,
Yes,
okay?
yes.
And it may be that if you draw out a whole bunch of areas where you don't have minority folks that live, you can get yourself a district of 6,000 people that's at 60%.
I think the way in practicality that this would work is that you would say to these map makers, the MMD map maker, and specifically, see if you can draw us 5, what do we have, 5 or 6? 6?
5.
See if you can draw us 5 MMDs with a plus or minus variation of 1% or 2%, and then they will try to do this. And if they can't do it, then they're gonna come back and say it's not possible. It's not possible when you factor our map into the county in totality as a whole. So we have to tweak them 2 or 3%, you know? I mean, I think that's how it's gonna happen. Because Sam's district, like Merton said, is it's barely there.
And I have a lot of problems with mine, but at any rate, I wanna go back to what you said. So,
Sam, I would have given you those
when
streets.
we talk about 5, we're not telling them 5, because that was the problem that we got into by.
5 is what we have now,
Right.
and you have to base everything on that 5. And the problem is, we're probably gonna need more than 5, which
Yeah.
means
Yeah, you
the
can't
existing
limit 'em.
5, which are not easy to, believe me, are not easy to construct, has to be recannibalized to create a 6th and maybe even a 7th. And trust me, people can say it's easy, it's not if you look at the way things are actually configured.
You know, and then, when you get down to the blocks, and considering the 108 and the 107, all of
Assembly
that comes in,
districts.
and then
Census tracts.
it's, but my point is this, and they should not, we're not going to be limiting them. But you know what, right now, I think, we're trying to do something that has to be done through the RFP process. And I think that's another whole discussion and really should not take place here. That's just my point.
Does the commission or the committee members have to sign off on the RFP?
Well, they're governing that process, so.
They're preparing it.
They're evaluating the RFPs, they're designing that process.
And everything ultimately has to be approved by the entire legislature.
Yeah, not every stage of the game.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
The ultimate
Yeah.
process, we will have the vote.
I'm gonna say, I get what you're saying. I think we can have another hour conversation about whether it's 2, 5, whatever. I personally think number two says what you want it to say, it just doesn't have a number. It's like saying, this is a rectangular table.
Well, then you know what you do?
You could say it's a gray rectangular table and it's still true.
Then do me a favor, okay? See the paragraph above, last line. Factors,
Yeah.
take out the words "to consider." Just cross them out for a second. And under 2, shall minimize. Because everything else is telling you you shall do it.
So get rid of to consider,
Yeah,
factors should.
factors include, but shall not be limited to. And then in number 2, instead of minimization, shall minimize. Such, and the one underneath it, shall
if
consist.
you're
Number
gonna-
4, each district shall be as compact.
If you were gonna say shall in 2, I think you have to say to the extent practicable there.
I have no problem with that.
And I think you could
Yeah.
split the baby.
Yeah,
Get
to the extent
the
practicable.
concern.
Shall minimize to the
Okay.
extent practicable.
I got it, I got it.
Should we put, there's a maximum constitutional allowance.
Well,
Should we
that's,
put
you
that
know,
in
that's
there?
just
They all
settled
know that.
law.
They're
You know, you can't go above it. I mean, I happen to
Well,
be an election
they knew
judge.
it.
Every
Just
time
so,
I know
just so
it.
it's
We're gonna have
in
to-
there so people
You can
know.
always
Okay,
change
is that
it.
okay,
Water
Lauren?
Frank's
Bigger, I
not doing
would-
it this time. The other
I think it's
females
okay, it says the same thing,
Says
it's
the
just
same
a little
thing.
tighter.
Okay.
Okay, let's keep moving along.
We got a lawyer at the head of the table, so I just,
Well, I think, this is gonna preserve, I mean, I share this concern that you have one, about drawing these districts and needing the flexibility to maneuver around these census tracts. I think it's a legitimate concern, I see Paul's point. I think you're gonna get there here, especially if you put this language to the extent practicable in there. That's your escape hatch to guarantee you the ability to go above that, to draw those districts.
Okay, so letter J is commission and MMD subcommittee appropriations, staffing and operations. Number 1, we didn't change anything. Number 2, we put this code of conduct language. It's very lofty, but it's in there. They should exercise the highest standards of conduct. And if there's any substantive communications that are occurring outside the public meeting, they should disclose them.
Who do
There's
they
no-
get disclosed to?
We don't, well, to members of
Each
the
other,
commission, to their
each other.
colleagues.
I guess I don't understand that. Initially,
You go and talk to the map maker yourself,
yeah,
On the side, on the QT.
on the side.
yeah.
Next time you convene officially, you're gonna say, by the way, I talked to,
The map maker.
I had some concerns about the map, I expressed them to Chris.
No,
map
but-
maker."
Do I, as a legislator, have an ability to go talk to the map maker?
No, because this is gonna be independent now if this passes.
Well, you
We're-
do,
we're-
but they
No,
have.
no, before,
They
it
did.
prohibited communication with legislators and candidates, and now we seem to have taken that whole section.
No,
No,
I would disagree.
Well, where does it say you can't do
It's
it?
saying that they have, commission members and staff, so the staff have 2 attorneys who are staffing the commission. And they're working with the folks who are putting together the maps. It is on them to disclose that Paul Bergdorf came and met with them one day to talk about his concerns. The onus is on them.
So so any legislator can ad hoc go in and discuss their concerns
And the commission shall disclose that.
in a private meeting.
It doesn't
Well,
say.
these are gonna be
that.
public, these are gonna be subject.
Well,
to-
no.
hear what
You
you
know,
say.
I've seen the way reapportionment happens, okay? There are legislators who hire lobbyists to go talk to people. That's why I didn't want lobbyists involved in this. Everybody says, oh, let's have an academic.
Okay, so can you make a recommendation?
Well, I don't understand why we took out the prohibition of members being involved in the process.
Okay, can I make a recommendation then, given what I think I hear? can we say, commission members and staff shall exercise the highest standards of conduct and disclose substantive communications, including those from members of the legislature with commission colleagues that occur outside public hearings or meetings?
Where's that? Somebody tell me quick.
That work?
What page, what section are you on again?
Where are we at?
So the
Two
majority council can
off
We are in
J.
section J,
Jay?
Is that what you want?
sub 2.
I think anyone associated with the legislature.
Well, then legislature or staff?
The legislature,
Staff,
Staff, or
any other elected
Or-
countywide official.
or political official.
or
Okay.
elected.
Public
Or
office.
any of the people that are not supposed to be involved in the, in the
Okay.
choice.
Is everybody okay with that?
Wait,
You don't have to name
In-laws.
anybody.
Are we
Public
taking
official,
away
period.
don't forget we're having hearings. So are we taking away of the ability of the legislators to question?
No,
Okay, we're not.
your vote is gonna be whether or not you,
No, I wanted to get to the vote and to hear, well, you didn't listen to me, so, you know. So what we're trying to do is to ensure, we don't want to take away the legislators' right to the due process of them just doing their job.
Oh.
Okay, from, you know, I'm just trying to,
No, not at all.
They can
In
attend a
fact,
public
It's
hearing
very
and voice
clear.
their concerns, if
Right.
that's what you're saying.
it's, that occur
Yeah.
outside public hearings or meetings of the commission. I think that's what you're saying.
That-
Why?
I
that's-
assume members of the legislature are gonna be active participants in the public hearings. Right?
if they're doing what they,
But what you don't want to do is you don't want to have a legislator who happens to know the map maker or know the map makers, whatever, sit down and say, you know, would be a really great district
Right.
for me. And
Been
so,
there, done
as you
that.
construct your building blocks, maybe you want to, you know, start with this as the first one.
I think you're gonna have to spell out the fact that legislators cannot have conversation.
Well, we
with-
had that language, that's why I'm saying somehow it got jettisoned along the,
Well, that's
the
what you're
way.
saying, that, you know, they can't talk to them. If they can't talk to who is talking to the map maker? Is he talking-
map maker is supposed to be looking at the data and is supposed to be putting it together based on,
The RFP that's been issued.
that's why I said the criteria.
I think that we require a disclosure and identify that includes legislators and electeds, and do it that way. You know, I think having a prohibition, it's a different way to go at it. This is a disclosure requirement.
Oh.
So,
Very good. I like that.
it's a disclosure requirement. So if the commission is saying, well, Paul Bergdorf and his lobbyists come to see me every Monday because they want to talk about his district, pretty soon, you're going to have the public shaming of the fact that you're trying to cook your district,
Yeah,
right?
but who else, who do they get to talk to that doesn't get disclosed?
Nobody. Outside the commission, if it's a substantive conversation, they disclose it.
So any party official,
It
any
says-
other,
Yeah.
Can't have any of
They
these
have to
old
disclose, and
ex-judges
we're
calling and.
identifying
not an
with a
ex-judge,
We're
Yeah.
identifying with a parenthetical, and I'll list people,
What they do
members
with
of the
those ex-judges.
legislature, staff,
okay,
electeds,
I'd like to,
whoever you want, we'll
once
list.
again, I'd like to see that.
Make a quick comment?
Sure.
Could you, and I know you're gonna restructure this and you're trying to get through all this, but right now, when you read it, this, and I realize I got moved from the next couple paragraphs. It says disclose substantive communications with commission colleagues, so it makes it sound as if you're speaking to a commission colleague, and that's the only group. If you just changed it around, then added the extra language, so, and disclose to commission colleagues substantive communications with, and then
Okay,
public
got it.
officers or whatever it might
Got
be.
it. Can you just write that for me and send it to me, so I don't lose that?
Absolutely.
Okay, can we keep going here?
Sure.
Yeah, just, I want to say one thing.
It doesn't currently apply to this code of conduct. You just have to add
Yeah, gotcha,
the commission and the subcommittee.
okay.
Joanne, you got it, F and H? you gotta count a Y missing off the word county.
Yeah, I
you
know, that's.
I just wanted to throw that in there.
I had one concern on the commission members reporting to the other commission members.
Yeah.
No, I can think of like a criminal trial where they tell the jurors not to report back to the other jurors if somebody approaches them or something. I mean, you could taint the whole commission, right? If you go to your other people and say, well, Paul Bergdorf came up to me and, do you think there should be another avenue, someplace else they can complain to without tainting the rest of it?
Well, but
It's not a jury trial, that's the problem.
I don't
We don't
view it as
want
a
unrelated people.
But do you want to taint the other people on the?
But the consideration and discussion is not tainting, it's just consideration and discussion that'll be ruled on by the merit in the small collective and the larger collective.
what if it's a good thing?
Wait a minute.
What if somebody in the legislature says, I was thinking about this last night,
No.
and this is really important that,
No, we're saying they have to say,
that
So
the
if Paul
commission
can't come up all
reads
the time
this
and
opinion
dominate.
or if Paul
about
Bergdorf calls them.
something,
Or he comes
about
by
a
their
case,
office
a
twice a week.
redistricting case, and they tell you as a
Not that
commission
it can't be
member,
done,
I see
just
you in the
that you have to
grocery
tell.
store, saying, you know
Said they
what,
can't talk
so
to each
great
other.
I saw you, because
Is there
I
a
think you guys
two-session?
should do this, review this body of work.
I'm confused by what it says.
You going back to the commission and saying, I saw Joanne in the grocery store and she mentioned this to me. We're assuming it's bad, but it might be good. So we're just saying they have to disclose. So at the next meeting, you're saying to your whole commission and staff, listen, Joanne Cunningham approached me and suggested we look at X, Y, and Z. I think it's a really good idea, we should do that.
Or they could say, Paul Bergdorf, he was a slime ball, and
right.
let's screw him, let's really.
Or that,
Carve
Paul
just say
is-
straight up 11 ways
Right.
to Sunday.
Or it can be a bad thing. Paul and
say
his
that.
lobbyists want to meet with me every week. They happen to go to the same coffee shop that they know I'm at.
Rod
And he
Gun Club.
happens to every week talk about
Thursday
how
night.
great a district he is,
I was out shooting with Paul the other day, and
right?
he kept whispering into my ear,
Gotta have a
Shaker
little
Heights,
structure here.
Shaker
I think
Heights.
disclosure is a powerful disinfectant.
So what if everything has to be in writing? So, any legislator can say whatever they want, but it's all listed there. So, yeah, if a legislator went and said, I want these streets in my district, because I know these people and they're gonna vote for me, that would be in writing, and the commission could choose whether or not they want to consider that, but if they did, it would be pretty clear that they were
Here's what the
following,
Well, I thought.
or if it was a good thing, they
Right,
could.
but I don't think that precludes somebody from constantly showing up at the coffee shop that they know I'm at to mention, I'm not gonna put it in writing that I really love my little central Dunmore district and can you just keep it the way it
Yeah.
is, because it's so great,
But if they disclose it, the commission members have to disclose it in writing, so it's on an official record of all the public comments from legislators or public officers.
I mean, I would go along with the disclosure, but it was very simple here. It was said, commission members and staff may not communicate with or receive communications about redistricting matters from anyone outside of a public hearing. This paragraph does not prohibit communication between commission members, staff, legal counsel, or consultants retained by the commission.
Why can't the legislators talk to the commission, okay, I'm gonna call them the commissioners, the commission
right.
members, whatever you wanna, why can't they talk to
They
the
should be able
commission?
to talk.
I think they should,
All she's
because
saying
that's,
is that it should be
We're just saying
disclosed, that's all.
disclosure. I like this language better because it's gonna happen. This says they're required to tell their colleagues, because it
The
is gonna
colleagues or
happen.
the public?
No, their colleagues.
Does anybody else in the legislature have a right to know that a certain legislator has made a case for how they want the town of Colony cut up?
Well, I assume they're gonna share this at the commission. If they're sharing this information with their colleagues, it's going to be in a venue that other people are
Well,
participating.
then have the disclosure be, make sure that it's public.
but I think,
I think. we're
Number one on the
overthinking.
agenda.
Well,
Public in writing.
I don't care.
All right, I'm adding
Countywide
stuff.
5
Can we
times.
move
Well, we're
on?
ending this at 7:15 because my wife and I need to pack for our vacation, so.
All right, we're in the
Where you
home
going?
stretch.
Cape Cod.
We're in the home stretch. So let's go down to number 4, this language all about notes, reports, any work product for both have to be maintained and preserved in the house files in the office of the chairman. That's because nothing was saved before, there were no minutes, there were no nothing, so that's a no-brainer.
It's gonna go on the website? You said that later, right?
Yep, everything's on the website, but the point is, there, Judge Kahn was sort of really brutal about the fact that there was like no minutes of meetings and basic stuff.
Do you think that wasn't on purpose? I mean, you know, there was a reason all this happened the way it did.
Okay,
Sadly.
Section
stenographer
K.
didn't show up.
Section K is the commission and the MMP subcommittee hearings, public comment periods, and public access to information. The subcommittee is empowered, they can have hearings to get public input. The new stuff in here is the website is a venue for information. Going down to, we moved that section. But all of this section is basically lots of input, public hearings, websites, information, you know, discussion. It's all supposed to be amped up so that we don't run afoul of doing this in full view. All right, the final report, that's section L. Number 1 is the county legislature by a majority vote shall adopt the commission's final reapportionment report. Should the report be rejected by the legislature or vetoed by the executive, the commission shall be empowered to continue its work through subsequent amendment processes to ensure passage and enactment. The legislature shall provide feedback and recommendations for amendments that they shall consider in their redrafting. So this is a couple other bites at the apple.
I just want to make a comment.
Yeah.
I would change that shall to a may. I
May
think if
consider?
you want the commission to be as independent as possible, then I would say that the commission may consider in its redrafting the final report. Ultimately, we want them doing the work.
Right.
We should not require them to say, well, this is what the you know, they can take it under consideration and guidance, and if it's reasonable and thoughtful, then they can incorporate it.
Okay.
Where are you,
It's
Chris?
changing shall to may.
In what
In
line?
L, L1,
Who says DD?
The committee,
What line?
Sentence 2.
it's the second sentence in red at the very bottom.
The legislature shall provide its feedback and recommendations for amendments that the commission shall consider. I would change it to may.
It gives it a little more
Flexibility.
distance and flexibility.
Well, independence is
Independence.
the way I see it.
Okay, are you guys okay with that? Chairman's discretion?
Just the legislature shall provide what?
May provide.
Oh, may provide.
Consider, no.
May consider, shall provide, may consider.
Shall provide and may consider.
Next line.
Okay, what I just passed around, a couple of technical changes, and the reason I passed around now is because Pat gave me language for section M for the effective date. The new language is, this local law shall take effect immediately upon filing with the Secretary of State. And then we have the language right after that, that is essentially the ballot initiative.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I guess, I still, my same question as before, like, who is watching over them to make sure that it's all going according to plan? If they take longer than 2 years, how is that gonna impact the next election? And, you know, you got all these people waiting for the information.
Right.
How can we ensure that the timeline is gonna be, do we set the timeline ahead of time when we, you know, constitute the committee? Do we say, you know, you really have to be done in 2 years and 2 months, and we gotta have a product? And then what happens if it gets blown, then we just retain our same districts? That's not possible. So how do you, that's my question. What's the timeline? Who's watching that the train is still moving at a pace that's reasonable?
Well, here's what I would say about the who's watching is, and I think these, if you're appointed to this commission, the expectation is you are an individual that's interested, capable, and a professional who's a serious person who wants to engage in this. You're gonna go to the meetings, you're gonna voice your opinion, you're gonna represent your community, you're gonna do all that.
Commission doesn't have a chair, does it?
No.
It doesn't?
then
Well,
you-
they
you
might,
wanna
they
put
might
that in.
decide to have a chair.
Yeah.
You'd
I
want a
mean,
chair to
when you're
push it
talking
along.
about who's in charge, who's driving the bus?
Yeah.
All right, I'll put one
Historically.
sentence in, the
Somebody
commission and
didn't-
reapportion subcommittee shall elect its.
Do you anticipate they'll be doing like monthly reporting, or, you said product, and I get, I'm on a lot of committees and we have a lot of products. Like, so I was wondering, what are we gonna be seeing during the course of the process? Is it a 2-month, a 6-month report,
I
A tweet every now and
assume we're gonna be going to the commission's public meetings and their, I mean, aren't we
Could they do like periodic
periodic
updates?
updates?
I mean,
Okay.
every quarter or something like that?
How about periodic updates?
I mean, I know I'll be participating in what goes on where I am, but I don't necessarily know that that's going on in Guilderland or Glenmont or in the hill towns.
I mean,
you
a
know.
great thing would be to know that when,
We're not great at communication.
preliminary census data comes out, wouldn't it be nice to see it and have the, commission?
And that's what happened.
Everybody good with those? Elected leaders, periodic updates? Should there be an end date for the commission, like the commission shall complete its work by 1 year after the, Chris, what do you think?
Chris, you went through it. When did you vote on, do you know if you vote on it
Too soon.
the year?
We
before?
voted on, one is
Too
right,
soon.
I
I
mean, it was shoved
understand.
down our throats.
Well, I mean, in the legislature, they vote on it,
In
don't they?
the state
I don't know,
legislature,
I'll find a place.
I got 2 more when you're
they
ready.
did it by the end of session, It's usually packaged with a bunch of other
Alright.
stuff.
Can I- can I
This is
Might be yours.
I'll do
This,
this
on
tomorrow.
this, I'm trying to remember, so, is it so much, every time we change the lines, we don't have to vote, is that a referendum? I'm just asking, I don't know.
No, when the lines are a local law.
Oh, okay.
That's
Okay.
literally a block by block. That's what the local law looks like.
Oh, okay.
It's-
Okay,
Lays
so-
them out,
Alright,
District 1, and it spells out the streets and everything.
I-
And the software does that, the computer software
Right.
literally extrapolates the
Right.
census block data into streets.
Okay, again, on this now, same thing. So, I think where we run into the issue, is when, it's the year of an election, you know what I mean? And so, I think that's where we're gonna run into the problem in trying to push.
So let's map this out.
Back it up.
This is a good point, 2020 census data comes out. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
April is when the data comes out?
No, that's,
When the,
the data comes out like 2021 April.
Right.
Okay,
If you're lucky.
So 2021, the data comes out.
In the election,
2021, we form the commission.
I think you do that before that.
no,
Because you have to do-
2020, we formed the commission in
You have to do
2020.
they have to
In
approve
the year of
the
the census,
RFP.
we're soliciting
2020.
people, we're
Okay,
getting people
but-
interested,
Yeah.
and
So
all
we,
that.
20 is the solicitation.
right,
Yes,
And our-
2021, they get their data.
Right.
right,
2020,
hopefully.
I think you have to adopt the lines by the end of 2022, so that they're all ready by January 1st, 2023, which would be an election year.
Okay.
Right?
So December
again?
31st or something like that?
Yeah, the year, I would say the year preceding an election.
there you
That's
go.
the year,
So
that's the
that's
language
what
we
we need something,
Yeah, the report, a final report
Must
shall
be
be,
completed by,
adopted.
Does the Board of Elections need it in a certain time
Well,
to
they're
make
gonna
the
get
ETs?
it,
They're gonna
they
get
got
it.
it by January 1st.
They got
They're
it
gonna have
15
January,
minutes
February,
before last
March, April, they're gonna have a lot of time.
so the county legislature by a majority vote shall adopt the commission's final reapportioned report by,
December 31st of a year preceding
22, yeah.
an election, but you can't use it.
yeah, right.
Well, let me
Preceding-
ask a question. You're asking about while it ends. Is there any other circumstance, because this is gonna go in the charter, that would key a redistricting? For example, you get census updates, okay? And
The
some,
municipal home rule law only allows us, state law prohibits us from redistricting more than once every 10 years anyway.
okay, so there's no
Court order.
prescription of law or,
The only person who can tell us to redistrict again is a judge. And that's what happened with Con.
does this mean you could not downsize?
We could, however, the downside, say if we wanted to downsize,
Yeah.
and the issue came up in 2024, could not redistrict to effectuate the downsize until 2030, because you can only
Okay.
redistrict once every 10 years. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
You could
Okay.
downsize, you could try to downsize before
So
2020.
any downsizing would have to be
You get one
would
crack.
have to be inferior to the reapportionment
Yeah, I got no
process.
big pissy match with Sean Morris and Frank Russo
Okay.
over this
I
issue.
still have two more questions.
I have
Can I have
What
one
else?
thing?
It turns out I was right.
Can a person be on both the subcommittee and the big committee, just out of curiosity? And my second one was about the budgeting, and are we anticipating providing space, or that's like an audit and finance conversation for another time.
We appropriate, and I assume that conversation
we did
is,
have to have
we've
space.
gotta
You're right,
house
you brought up
this
very
and-
good.
I
gonna
was
be
going
using
to
our
make a
space?
suggestion that
A
say
lot of empty space.
that all the expenses shall be subject to monies provided by the legislature. Because one of the things that could happen here is that somebody could say, oh, I need this consultant out of Washington that costs $2,000 an hour. And they're going to need 100 hours, so it's $200,000 for one consultant.
Well, there is gonna be a budget, I mean, there.
No, but I mean, I would like, once again, this says, will provide subject to funds appropriated by the legislature for said purpose.
All right,
So
I
that
think
there's a limit.
Okay, I'll put that in.
Yeah, I'd like to throw one last thing out, as I was sitting here talking, just one last thing, just.
You've been patient.
And that is when it comes to selecting members of the committees. Right now, for the primary committee, the county executive selects 3 members, the majority.
Chair.
Oh, the chair, I'm sorry, the chair selects 3, the minority leader selects 3, majority leader selects 3 members. When it comes to the subcommittee, the MMD committee, the chair of the LBC selects 2 members, and then the rest of that committee or caucus selects the other members. Would anybody be open to the majority leader and the minority leader selecting 1 member to each of that committee?
To what committee?
To the MMD?
Yeah. Yeah,
You wouldn't like that?
no.
Why not?
That's, the main reason why we have the legislative black caucus right now is because of lack of representation that we're receiving, period. And so,
You think that would water down the representation?
Yeah, I do.
All right.
Subject to funds
I know.
appropriated by the legislature. That work, Tim? Okay. Just so it's clear, it's not a blank check, there's a budget.
So here's the issue. There's a lot of suggestions to changes to the bill. I think this is pretty good. It's longer than I anticipated, but good. And I'm thank everybody for coming. That being said, there's a lot of language changes that were proposed that are going to be incorporated into the subsequent draft, right?
Right.
We discussed some, other ones, the language is still being kicked around a little, there's these handouts. For purposes of the public hearing next week, what do members want to do? We have the original bill, we have this mark, and now, look, if we want the public hearing to consider all the discussions, we have to read them into the record, which quite frankly, I don't know if we can.
Can't we have an amended bill of local law O? And if I give this bill to the staff tomorrow with our changes, can't that be the subject of the public hearing?
I don't know, I'll defer to Brandon and Arnis, he's.
I'm going to jump in here. I couldn't see the benefit with all these amendments, thoughts, and ideas flying around. As you said, it was a constructive meeting, but to have a public hearing and actually have something coming out of it that could be reviewed by a court of laws somewhere down the line, I think you need to tighten this all up and defer it. I mean, this is obviously an important process, but we have time, and if it doesn't somehow make this particular round and make the referendum period, so be it. But the product that you would have right now would be, as you said, I don't know how you could possibly do it and have anybody in their right mind is standing in front of you, know what they're talking about.
And you know, I have to say, I spoke to Bill about this earlier today, at one of the meetings that we had with the attorneys. We did say that, you know, it's okay if we don't make the November referendum. As long as we pass it, you know.
In the next 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, and that's what we want.
I'd rather do it right.
We want the best product possible. We want the best legislation, having done all the due process that we need. So it doesn't mean that we will not vote on it this year, the legislature. But the referendum may not take place until next year.
No, I'm okay with that.
And that's what I'm saying, I am too.
My only issue is, we actually didn't make that many significant changes. I would rather have an amended version out there that we can at least post on the website. I don't wanna have like too many
Sure.
versions of this floating
Here's my
around.
suggestion. I tend to agree with Arnis. There's other members and legislators who are gonna wanna know what all these changes are. Some of them, we didn't even write down, right?
I wrote them down.
You did.
I wrote them down.
Well, some of it we left a little
You know,
hazy,
there's-
we're gonna
there's
work on language.
Merton's thing, this language proposed by Merton, I don't even know how we left off with that.
I left off that I'm gonna look at that section and look at B and see if there's some additional kind of, you know,
So,
information.
we're gonna have another meeting next Tuesday, and I understand it's a lengthy agenda. That being said, you know, if we can incorporate all the amendments, Monday, I'm sorry. If we can incorporate all the, changes in that have been discussed tonight and revisit this on Monday, I would be happy doing that. That's my own personal preference.
Okay, so-
I don't know if we can vote on all of this
No.
tonight. I just don't think it's feasible. I mean, if it takes 30 minutes out of our meeting on Monday, so be it. But I think, you know, the sponsors, they wanna keep this process moving. I don't know if we're gonna hit this referendum period. I do think it's gotta be done right. And I think we should have an opportunity to revisit all these different changes on Monday. If that means 30 minutes, we'll take this up first, and then we'll move, you know, the other people will have to wait, you know?
Joanne, why don't you just email all the changes to everyone, and they can have input before Monday.
Well, let's not, those chain emails get kind of
Well,
cumbersome. I'd like to see the changes, because I know from my own point of view, you know, when the agenda went up on Thursday night, on Friday, I'm sitting there with the hand marked out copy, and I spent a couple hours.
This is helpful.
going through that.
Version.
Yeah.
Alright, what I would,
You're the sponsor, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna defer to you.
okay, so here's what I would like to do. I mean, first and foremost, we're not making everybody's every single change. We're just not. We're making changes that are reasonable and thoughtful, that keep with the spirit and the essence of this. I think there were a lot of good inputs, and, you know, I was mindful to take a look around the room when issues were being discussed to see if there truly was consensus. And those are the things I wrote with the heaviest black pen, because I think there's a lot of those.
It's your bill, so ultimately.
So I would like to, make some changes to this. My issue is, I'd rather start with local law O, with the new O. I wish we could number the versions like we do in the legislature, so that we know what we're looking at. This is the law committee. We just collectively made some changes. So I'd like to take our last version and then redline that, and not keep it having red lines on red lines on red lines. And then circulate that. I am fine with not making the deadline. I want to keep the momentum going, because I think we're plowing ahead and we're moving in the right direction. But at some point, we're gonna put the pencil down and we're gonna go. And-
Well, to that end, you know, there's 12 or 13 members who bothered to come to this committee meeting to spend 2 hours talking about this. I'm not gonna tolerate anybody saying that they were not included in this discussion as this process unfolded. You know, if people are interested, they can come to these meetings in public. I don't wanna hear any jibber jabber in conference or caucus or whatever the hell it is that
people want
They
this.
can look at the tape.
They're gonna come here,
No,
like Merton did,
yeah.
and Wanda, and Frank, and Richard, and everybody else who doesn't sit on this committee to provide input. And, you know, that's gonna be my position moving forward, and I'll say it on the floor publicly.
And not just that, but I've gone out of my way to reach out to people and sit down and ask for comment, and a lot of people have done that. So at some point, you know, the time clock runs out and the pencil's gotta be put down and we,
You can
know,
you could revise this from
you
next
could
2 years.
revise it endlessly,
Sure.
you know.
Can I make a suggestion, just to really make things easier? And I know you say you'd like to work off of a clean O,
Right,
but if you worked in track changes
I do.
off the one that you have marked in red, and you did it as a second author, everybody in a different color would see all the changes we made here tonight.
Like instead of as Brent, you could do it as Joanne.
I know.
Just this
that's
one,
just
it
'cause
could
Rick
work.
bought the-
Or one of your daughters or son.
That's what I
Do it in green.
You
I
know,
can do
that,
that, I'll make track changes in a different
and
color.
that
Make it
would,
in green.
I think that would be really helpful to everybody in terms
Do
of.
green now.
So that's, okay, so that's the
I
plan.
just think you have to sign in the computer as yourself, not your husband.
So that's the plan. Joanne will make the
I like that.
changes.
Who's Brent?
We'll circulate the changes, we'll incorporate them into the agenda, and we'll review it on Monday.
No, I really, if I had